One of the most common introductory questions in the world: what do you do for a living? When asked this question, many people are quick to respond with their job titles. But if you think deeper, that is the wrong kind of answer. The basis of this question is more complex than it seems. What do you do for a living is more like, how do you help contribute to society? In what ways do you help improve, regulate, and create? If you're a builder, well, then the answer to such a question is relatively simple. You can see the outcome of your efforts daily. As you erect houses, offices, or buildings, the result of your hard labor can be visualized and the final result is tangible. Whether you believe it or not, completing a building project achieves something valuable and real. But if you're a middle manager at a large marketing department, the answer to this question may be much harder to figure out. What tangible value are you bringing to the world? To understand, we first need to get a history lesson. This conversation was originally brought to the mainstream when David Graeber wrote his infamous book called Jobs, a Theory, back in 2013. It was a book that technically should have no place in a capitalistic society, a book that discussed the rising phenomena of useless jobs. In his writings, Graeber defines a BS job as paid work that meets two conditions. The first is simple. The job has to be so completely useless and unnecessary that even the employee himself cannot justify the position's existence. And second, as part of the work relationship, the employee and his or her colleagues, even though they feel their job is useless, act as if it's important. If that description matches your current position, don't worry. You are not alone. Here's a clip of David Graeber from a 2018 presentation where he talks about just how commonplace this type of work really is. Take a listen.
This kind of thing, and I realize that there's a social problem that just nobody's paying attention to. I got people writing to me too, saying, "Yeah, I work in the financial services industry, and I've been passing it around. This thing has come across my desk at least 20 times today." And I was like, "God, you guys really aren't doing much, are you?" Okay, so. With that came the realization that the problem was worse than I thought. But I was still thinking, okay, 15%, maybe maximum 20% of all jobs would be like this. Eventually, someone did a survey at YouGov, and they took stuff actually out of words that I'd used in the piece. Does your job make a meaningful contribution to society? I discovered 37% of people in this country believe that it does not, or certain that it does not. 13% were unsure. Only 50% were quite sure their job does do something, which actually is pretty amazing if you think about it. Because, think about all the jobs that no one would possibly say that. If you're a bus driver, you're doing something, you might hate your job, but you're not going to say it's useless and pointless and why am I doing this? People need to move around. If you're a nurse, if you're think of all the jobs that obviously need to be done. So the conclusion, would have to be that anybody who you see sitting there in an office and you're wondering, is this person secretly thinking his job doesn't need to exist? The answer is yes.
Since about the 1970s, service jobs have seen an explosion. There are now nearly 5 service jobs for every 1 manufacturing job, and that trend doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. Now, when I say service jobs, you may be thinking of the person serving you your cup of coffee at Starbucks, and while you're not wrong, it's not these service jobs that this video will focus on. While many may regard these positions as low level and poorly paid, it's still very easy to see that they achieve something. Giving you your cup of coffee provides value, and while this small action may be seen as unimportant, it's still undoubtedly achieving something. Zooming out in the sector, you can see just how broad this category of work really is. Everyone from the valet guy at your hotel to the CEO of a massive pharmaceutical company is technically categorized as a service worker. Digging deeper in this category reveals an alarming trend. As service jobs exploded in numbers, so did the rise of jobs. You would think that the miracle of capitalism, a system that is supposed to weed out poor workers and inefficient positions, would result in companies being punished by market forces to rid themselves of these positions. Instead, the opposite has happened. In order to understand this trend, we first need to understand a very different system, called communism. You see, in countries like Cuba, the official unemployment rate is 3.87%. That on paper seems incredible, but look a little deeper and you start to see the cracks in a system that is built upon jobs. In communist countries like Cuba, the government creates all of the jobs, and as communism is the movement of the worker, these types of systems pride themselves on creating all the jobs necessary to give the impression that everybody is employed. While they would never admit this system results in millions of unnecessary jobs being created. You can get a sense of this by taking a look at this clip from Bald and Bankrupt, a traveling YouTube channel. In this clip, he visits some of the shops in Cuba's capital. Take a look.
There's an oversupply of stopcocks for toilets, but there's not an oversupply of meat, of vegetables and things like this. That's the pity. Of toilet paper. There are real shortages in Cuba, unfortunately.
¿Por qué aquí todas tiendas están vacías?
Aunque esto es comunismo. ¿Sabes lo comunismo?
Sí, lo sé.
Esto es imperialismo. Esto es la desgracia de Cuba.
Let's go and check out a little kind of place that a local Cuban person would hang out if they wanted a coffee or something. Somewhere like this. ¿Tienes coffee? ¿Coffee? ¿No coffee? ¿Qué tienes? ¿Agua? Finito, finito, finito? Oh! So, okay, gracias. So as you see, I've come into like a local Cuban place and they've got nothing. They've got look, things empty. The menu today is empty. They just haven't got the goods even to make me a hamburger. So, yeah, things are getting pretty desperate probably here in Cuba.
So as you saw there, the near empty shops are filled with government workers who spend most of their day servicing non-existent customers buying limited or unwanted products. The drive for full employment gives rise to tons of positions where your responsibilities are close to nothing. So how did this system bleed into our Western world where capitalism reigns supreme? Well, the explanation is perfectly summed up in his book. In the book, he talks about a wide array of service jobs that have been created with no responsibilities, categorizing positions into 5 different types. At the peak of the bull job pyramid stands taskmasters, or people who manage or create extra work for those who do not need it. Examples include middle management and leadership professionals. Various pieces of research find that middle managers are the unhappiest employees at U.S. organizations. The general consensus is pretty simple. With no value added and no apparent goal to seek, your mind begins to ask itself how and why it's being paid so well to do nothing. This question is seen posted dozens of times on Reddit boards and has now become commonplace within the large bureaucracies of the Fortune 500. To some, it may sound like a dream, but in reality, after a significant amount of time, the dream quickly fades to misery. An enormous amount of people do nothing or next to nothing at work. This isn't because they're lazy or bad workers, it's because we've reached a point where an acceptable, reasonable amount of work can be done with little to no effort. There is no sense whatsoever for most people to work 40 hours a week in many of these positions. It's not broken workers, it's a broken system. One that has caught the eye of many in the mainstream, and slowly this phenomena is being exposed. Take a listen to Duncan Trussell explain exactly this.
But also, if you really think about the fact that we are in a world where people have to go to work to do a job that, by the way, man, if there is a dude you need to get on this podcast, and there's a book that you would love. David Graeber wrote this book called Bullshit Jobs. This guy is a fucking genius, man. And this book, Bullshit Jobs, breaks down the phenomena of how many people are working in jobs that don't do anything for the world or the company they're working for. And it's not like this judgmental thing where he's like, yeah, that's a bullshit job. You're a blah, blah, blah. He's like an anthropologist, so he's very precise. But one of the qualifications for your job to be a bullshit job is that it's really kind of a worthless job. It's not really doing anything. And like companies have gotten so fucking big that they end up having like departments or people running departments or extra employees that don't really need to be there at all. And they have to pretend to work. That's what he writes about. He writes that if you really want to torture a person, not only give them like the job of like, pouring a glass of water in an empty glass and pouring it back, but then add to it that they have to deceive their boss into thinking that they're like doing an important job or they lose their job. So
if it was acceptable to leave work as soon as you were done with your duties, it would quickly become apparent who does nothing and who adds value. But if you've ever held one of these jobs, you would know that talking about how little work you do is a big no-no. Instead, employees who find themselves in these positions have to not only complete their duties, but also worry about putting on a false facade of constant busyness where the goal is to convince everyone around you that you're doing something at all times. The entire position becomes one big lie, and convincing management that you're important becomes the main duty. If you have one of these jobs, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed.